Okay. I'm my own technician. Back. Okay, so I'll just tell you about one of the songs in particular because I think there's a good story behind it. So I was dating this guy. And nice guy, graduate student, but there was a big problem. He got tired very early in the evening. Now, my dad gets tired early in the evening, but he's 80-something. Yeah. So, okay, when you're 80-something and you get tired in the evening, okay, but he was 35. So I didn't see this as any excuse to be tired in the evening. I'm a night owl. I know there's a problem with that. A lot of people have had a problem with that. I'm dating somebody now twice his age. Yeah, okay, kind of a problem with that. But anyway, so I wrote a song called Go to Sleep. And I want to play a little bit of it because it's really kind of fun. So, okay. Esta noche es una maravilla, buena para ir a pasear. Fíjate que no me canso nunca, por eso me quiero desvelar. Pero dices que no tienes ganas, que para nada quieres salir. La verdad es que me entristece ver que lo que no sabes es vivir. Now what I said so far was tonight's beautiful, great for going out, and I never get tired. But what makes me sad is that you don't know how to live. So the chorus is, yeah. Irte a dormir, si quieres vete ya. Al llegar la noche, ya que cansado estás. Irte a dormir, solo vas a estar. Y mientras te duermas, me voy a pachanguear. So what I said was, okay, you want to go to bed, you go right ahead, and I'm going to go party. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, that's the life of a night owl. It's really tough. So anyway, so that was the CD I did. It was really pretty fun to put together. Took a really long time. I'm trying to find my place. Oh, yeah. So in the meantime, at the restaurant, you know, we played the first couple of sets of the night, and it was more like, we had a tourist crowd. You know, 7 in the evening, that was pretty early. So we would play Guantanamera, and Cielito Lindo, and Guantanamera, and then Cielito Lindo, and then Guantanamera. And when that happens, you know what happens is that you tune out. We tune out. So we would pay attention, we would take some time and stroll through the crowd. So we would do that too, you know. And, you know, funny things happen with the crowd. Because one thing, like I said, I don't look Mexican. So sometimes I would hear people say, ¿Y esa? ¿Qué está haciendo? They would look at me and say, well, what's she doing here? And then I would turn around and in my best Spanish, I'd ask them which song they wanted to hear. And they would say, ooh. Those were really beautiful moments. But the other thing that happened, I know, I loved it. The other thing that happened a lot, well, I have a good story about that. Since a lot of you are teachers, I'll detour and tell you this story. So the first year I was in Tucson, I didn't get a good job. I was just subbing. But since I was bilingual, they used me a lot. And so this one day, they sent me to a 6th grade classroom. I walk in, and there's this skinny, scrawny little kid right in the front row. And he looks at me and he says, hoy nos vamos a jugar hasta la madre. So he said, we're going to have a hell of a good time. And I turned around and I said, otra palabrota, con el director te vas. One more swear word and you go to the principal. It was my best moment ever. Well, anyway, so as a mariachi player, you know, we're tired of Guantanamera and all this stuff. We're watching people. And we had this established restaurant. Marla's been there. Anybody else? Just my mom and Marla. Anyway, we had this restaurant, and people came regularly, and so we knew when they were having a good time with their partners, or when they were flirting, trying to find somebody, or when they came in with different partners. We knew that too. It was really fun to pay attention to. And so, like, I have this in the back of my mind, and I'd already written a book, but one day I was painting the house. Now, if you've ever painted your own house, you know that those houses are very big when you paint them yourself. right? They're very small when you're trying to find a place to put something. But so I'm really bored painting the house, and this scene came to me. A guy, because usually I played with mostly guys, 5 guys and me. And I imagined him watching as the boss's wife flirts with somebody not the boss. I had that scene in my head. It just came to me. I went for a swim. Kind of had it in the back of my mind. I came back and I started writing my first mystery, which was Mariachi Meddler. So, how did this creativity process all work out? The plot, this is an amateur sleuth mystery. But what I thought was fun was I could put in a lot of mariachi details that would be unique to this character. So I'll give you just a little bit of an idea. I'm just going to read a couple quick sections. So Andy's just finished playing for the night, and he's talking to his boss. And he says, okay, how did things go tonight? The boss asked. Well, things went fine until that drunk insisted on singing with us. Volunteer singers were a common nuisance. We didn't mind the grandfather belting out a favorite old song, or the granddaughter playing for the grandparents, or even the husband who wanted to sing one romantic, terribly done song to his wife. But when a guest singer approached the stage, tecate in hand, we knew we were in trouble. He wasn't so bad, Rolando said. This was not true. The balding crooner with the straw cowboy hat had started off beat and never found his way on. He mangled intonation as if it were a matter of style. As an extra embarrassment, after we beat him through El Moro de Cumpas, a corrido about a famous horse race, he insisted on slaughtering Pelea de Gallos, a huapango about a chicken fight. The crowd loved him, Rolando said. Yeah, his friends loved him. Everybody else whipped out cell phones so they wouldn't have to pay attention. Lighten up, Andy. You take everything too seriously. He forgot the last verse of El Moro de Cumpas. Everybody knows which horse ran the race. Big deal. I'm trying to save our audience from bad music. Well, hardly anyone noticed. I know. I always told myself not to be too critical. But then, I didn't listen. So anyway, I've got this protagonist who's a very good musician, because, you make people a little bit larger than life. And he's very critical about all these things that happen. And that's one thing that happened to us a lot, was that, it was a restaurant, so people would come in, they'd start drinking, and then they'd want to sing. And every time they were terrible. It was just a matter of how terrible they were going to be. So, sometimes we would have to switch keys mid-song, always exciting, or, step in, or sometimes we just let them do their worst. And Gilbert always insisted it was good for business, but I never thought it was a very good idea. Well, anyway, so I wrote that book, but my poor guy, he was so tired from his first adventure that I sent him to Greece on a vacation, as one does, right? She can tell you all about, best Greek vacation. So how I used music in that book is that I needed him to infiltrate into a bouzouki group. Now, bouzouki music, it's a folk music too, and it sounds a lot different from mariachi. There are a lot of Eastern influences, and so there are a lot of minor keys. The music sounds a lot different, but the energy of a bouzouki group is kind of the same. They're playing a bunch of songs that they've played a million times, so they're not really paying attention, and they're talking to each other, and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking and all this stuff. I loved watching them, so I had a lot of fun setting my mariachi character, he winds up subbing in a group and finding out some information, because he plays enough guitar, he can kind of go along. So that works out. Well, then I thought, I really loved living in Mexico, so I should set a book in Mexico. Somebody just asked, is it Durango, California? No, Durango, Mexico. They're both named after a Durango in Spain. But anyway, so I did my next book set in Durango, which is where I happen to live. Now, for this book, I really had fun, and I made the villain, can you imagine? The villain loves one song, and he listens to it over and over. Now, which song would that have been? Good, that would have been a good choice too. El Rey. He listens to El Rey day and night. The king, So anyway, had a lot of fun making fun of that song. But it happens. Okay, and so then I thought, well, what you're supposed to do in fiction you make things worse and worse for your poor protagonist. Otherwise, who would want to read it, right? So for the next book, I thought, oh, I'm really going to torment Andy. But it also coincided with something that happened in my own life, is what happened. We lost the restaurant. This was we lost it right before 9/11, and actually we would not have survived 9/11 anyway, because 9/11, then a lot of people didn't go to restaurants for a while. The restaurant business, not like COVID, but it really, it quieted down for a long time, so we would not have made it through that. But we closed in August. It was while I was out of town. I came back to Tucson. I was devastated because I loved playing at the restaurant. But anyway, so we lost the restaurant. So I thought, I'll really torment Andy by making him go play in an orchestra. That's a terrible fate for him because, as mariachis, you're kind of playing and you walk around and you talk to people, and if you miss an entrance, so what? It's okay. Orchestra music, how many of you have played in an orchestra? Okay, several of you. So you know this. You're supposed to pay attention to the conductor every time. And you're supposed to play what's written. So here's another side note. When I had another book, I think when Dizzy and Durango came out, I recruited a friend of mine. I have this great friend named Cookie who plays some mariachi. So we were going to play some songs, and I thought, let's add a third violin. So I asked my friend Ellen, who's in the symphony with me. I played a community orchestra in Tucson. So he plays and help us with some mariachi music. We've got a few things that are written out. So she said, okay. She was all game. And then we started rehearsing. And she would say, what? You didn't take the repeat. And I said, well, we don't take that repeat. But in the music, there's a repeat. She couldn't get over the idea that, like in regular music, if there's a note, you play it. But we just play things the way we've agreed to play them. So that's the way it goes. It's a whole different thing. So I thought it would be plenty of fun to have my poor musician have to play in an orchestra. It's just not what he's used to doing. So let me just give you a little bitty taste. I guess I better have a little drink here. Pretty tough stuff here in the morning. Okay, of how this starts. So this is dialogue. 22, yours? 16, but Zoran gave me a deal. I was waiting for the start of my first rehearsal with Tucson's professional orchestra, but I already felt more displaced than an opera singer with permanent laryngitis. The two violinists sitting behind me were discussing how expensive their instruments were. The young men weren't talking in hundreds, they were talking in thousands. I tried to slump down, which is hard to do for a guy who's 6 feet tall. I knew before entering the rehearsal room that I was in for a challenge, but I needed the job. I'd aced the audition because I happened to know the music of the conductor's favorite composer, but by now I wasn't sure whether to thank my luck or maybe send it back. In the classical world, conductors were gods. Musicians who wanted to keep their jobs recognized that fact and honored it. They also honored the rehearsal schedule. The hall filled quickly as the remaining musicians slid into their seats and assembled their instruments. Then they adjusted their music stands, a quarter of an inch this way, a third of an inch that way, as if the height of their stand would make a difference in their performance. Then they adjusted their chairs, shifting noisily to the left and right and back again, a sure sign that no matter their instruments, their real concern was pleasing the conductor. I attached my shoulder rest to my violin. I didn't get it on quite right, but I didn't want to join my fellow neurotics, so I left it as it was, slightly crooked, slightly awkward. That was exactly the way I felt. I tried to blame my feelings on the room, but the rehearsal hall was perfectly normal. The problem was me. So anyway, in Substitute Soloist, he goes on and has to play with an orchestra. You can guess that also doesn't go very well for him. So, but, you torment people as you go along. So in my latest Andy book, Kate's going to love this. She doesn't know already. I make him teach high school students. And it doesn't go very well because they don't really care. He's a very good musician, so that's always hard for musicians when you really care and they really don't. So let me just give you a little sense of this. I raised my violin, the kids prepared to play, and 6 of them came in with me. That was a good ratio. I might have been encouraged, but instead I quit playing and strode over to the guitarrón player. As often happened, the smallest, thinnest member of the group was the one who chose to play the biggest instrument, the one that functioned as a string bass. When Memo held the guitarrón across his chest in the usual way, the most I could see of him were his hands and his face. His eyes were a bit brighter than mine, but we both hosted shades of green. What key were you in, Memo? The key of F, Mr. Andy. Yes. And you, Lalo? Lalo looked down as if the answer were written on top of his instrument. D? Yes, Lalo. I waved my violin as if saluting him. You started in D, and Memo started in F. Why was that? The three violinists giggled, but Eugenio was the loudest. I turned so sharply I felt a muscle twitch. Did any of you violinists remember to play a B flat? I plucked one so hard that the note rang throughout the room. No, you did not. And then the trio hushed because they knew what was good for them. Anyway, poor Andy. He's such a good musician that, it's hard to play with kids, especially if they spend all their time on their cell phones. I see there is a question at the back of the room. Yes?
If you're going to have any kind of questions, you kind of need to...
Move it along? I'll just throw out these other parts.
Maybe they'll invite you back to next summer.
All right. So I've done a couple, not every book I do has something to do with mariachi, but in my recent book that was about the carillon, yes, our carillon, the carillon in Washington Park, I worked it in a different way, and how I did it was that I gave I created this professional performer who plays a lot of international music, so one of the songs he does is a mariachi song, and it's so cute. I'll play a little bit of it, I'm sorry, it's too cute to not play. It's called, in the book what happens is that Gina calls her sister and says, I need you to identify the song for me, and she hums a little bit of it, and the sister says, it wasn't me. And Gina says, no, you have to tell me what the name of the song is. I'm going crazy. I have to remember. It wasn't me. The name of the song, Yo No Fui. It wasn't me. It's actually a famous Pedro Infante song. He was a great performer, did movies and stuff. Anyway, but this is my favorite song of his. Si te vienen a contar cositas malas de mí, mandan todos a volar y diles que yo no fui. Y yo te aseguro que yo no fui. Tú tienes cara de pirulí, todo me dicen mal a mí. Y yo te digo que no fui. No, yo no fui. Anyway, so that's what I worked into the carillon chase. And just, for local interest, how many of you went to the International Carillon Festival? Good. Lovely. And Carlo van Ulft, if you've met him, wonderful. He's so sweet. It's a funny story. In December, I gave the Carillon Bells 10 copies of this book called Carillon Chase, because a lot of it has to do with Springfield. And especially, some very exciting scenes happen in the Carillon. And I was too scared to give it to the Carillonneur because he thought I was crazy. Because there's a kidnapping and this and that. Well, he's from the Netherlands. His wife's a big reader. She read it. She said, Carlo, this is fun. She gave it to him. And even though he's not a reader, he read the whole thing. They got a big kick out of it. And they invited me to go to the International Carillon Festival and give a reading. So I got to give a little reading on Saturday of the festival. If you've never been to the Carillon Festival, you'll need to go. It's usually the first week in June. It's free. And they've got this really nice innovation where they now have like a keyboard thing, and you can, a screen, and you can watch them play without being up in the little tower, which can only have about 8 people at a time. So anyway, that's in brief. That's kind of the summary of how I started with mariachi. All the things that's led me to do since then, and the ways that it's really enriched my life and been a lot of fun, and it's allowed me to come here and talk about it to a bunch of lovely ladies. So thank you very much. Thank you. Just going to turn this off.